What's up, space pirates? This is your Admiral, the decidedly debonair Dr. Disaster, and I was never the biggest fan of Man of Steel or the DC Snyderverse. Henry Cavill is an amazing Superman and just a stellar actor in general, but those movies were never my cup of tea. I watched most of them, but not all, and I haven't rewatched them in years. I feel like this is important context when I talk about the box office of Superman versus the Man of Steel, and how Superman is struggling to beat its 12-year-old counterpart.
Don't sing it, bring it.
Because the thing is, I know that the James Gunn bootlickers and butt kissers are immediately going to claim that I'm just a Snyder simp or something like that, which really couldn't be further from the truth. There are certainly things that I enjoyed about those Snyder movies, but I have major complaints. As an example, I hated how those films seemed to rush through the DC Universe story. In the second movie of the franchise, they introduced an aging Batman who had already entered into an I'm sick and tired of criminals, so I'm going to be very violent phase, and Superman was killed by Doomsday in that second movie. Everything was rushed entirely too fast for my liking.
We're gonna have to go right to ludicrous speed.
Zoom, zoom, zoom.
So with all of that said, it is interesting to me that the most recent box office projections, after seeing all the early showing numbers and after taking into account the updated projections for Friday, it looks like Superman is estimated to be bringing in about $115 million domestically on its opening weekend.
Not impressed.
If this ends up being the case, if Superman ends up only hitting $115 million, then it will have lost the head-to-head with Man of Steel at the box office, whose domestic opening weekend was a little over $116 million. Now, I grant you that this is only an estimate, but by this point in a weekend, they're usually fairly spot on with these estimates, which means that if you account for inflation, Superman is really getting its ass kicked by Man of Steel. Now, just for clarity, I haven't seen this movie personally, and I don't intend to, so I'm not claiming that it's bad or good or anything in between. I'm not suggesting the movie is woke, because I've heard that it isn't, but the political controversy surrounding the film right before its release seems to have hurt its numbers. Something hurt it anyhow, because the audience for the franchise has shrunk, and now James Gunn's Superman must do the embarrassing thing with regards to Man of Steel. They are forced to
Kneel before Zod.
Alright, me hearties, make sure that you hit the like button on this video, share it with your friends, subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, and I've begun uploading some content onto Rumble as well, so make sure that you follow Dr. Disaster on that site too, and also, give me a follow over on X, where my handle is Dr. Disaster 1. But anyhow, let's dig into the numbers for Superman. It is worth noting that, as Cosmic Book News pointed out on Twitter right before the weekend started, the estimates for the box office of Superman this weekend was $130 million or more. This headline from Forbes is from just a few days ago, and they are clearly expecting 130 mil, so something happened to this film in the past few days which put downward pressure on its expected box office haul for the weekend. Maybe it was the film itself. Maybe it was the comments made by James Gunn about Superman being an immigrant. I tend to lean toward that being a major turnoff for a bunch of people because I am consistently hearing that this movie is aggressively mid. But here are the latest estimates from Deadline. As usual, the asshats at this outlet do everything they can to make things seem as positive as possible for their corporate overlords. Superman leaps to $55 million Friday, now flying to $115 million opening. Leaping and flying are really interesting verbs to use to describe going down in the projections, but of course they won't mention the fact that these are actually downward projections. But here the article says Warner Brothers and DC Studios Superman is looking at a great $55 million first day, including all those $22.5 million previews. This puts the James Gunn directed movie on course as of this minute for a $115 million plus 3-day. The weekend is still young and there's room for upside. Some are spotting $120 million. Now, let's put these numbers into perspective and compare them to Man of Steel. So, it looks like Superman is going to end up with a box office that's pretty darn close to its predecessor, though this projection that we looked at suggests that it will lose. But either way, if we factor in the inflation on these numbers, it isn't even close. According to the website numbers.com, which I will link in the description if you want to take a closer look at the site, but according to them, the average ticket price in 2025 is roughly $11.31. If we divide the estimated $115 million that Superman is expected to rake in the United States by the average US ticket price, we can see that roughly 10,168,000 tickets are expected to have been sold for this film domestically this weekend. Now let's do the same thing with Man of Steel. According to Box Office Mojo here, Man of Steel took in about $116,619,000 at the box office on its opening weekend. And if you look at this chart from the numbers.com again, you can see that back in 2013, when Man of Steel was released, the average ticket price to the movies in the US was $8.13. So, if we divide Man of Steel's opening box office numbers by the average ticket price from back when it came out, this tells us that roughly 14,344,000 tickets were sold for Man of Steel. This means that Superman is tracking to sell about 70 to 71% of the opening weekend that we saw for Man of Steel. If Superman had opened back in 2013, that film would have made about $82 million compared to Man of Steel's $116 million. Or, another way of looking at it, if Man of Steel was released today and sold the same number of tickets, it would make about $162 million. So the question is, where did this roughly 30% of the audience go? Whether you love this new Superman film, or you hate it, or you just don't care, the numbers don't lie. There are fewer people watching this movie, despite reviews being fairly positive. Now, in this article, Deadline tries to downplay the effect of the political talk, going out of their way to suggest that MAGA, mentioned by name in this article as you can see there, but they suggest that this political movement, this MAGA movement, has no effect on the box office despite having won the popular vote in the country in the election last November. And maybe that's true, I don't know. I'm just going to ask some rhetorical questions in response to their claims. Why did Superman's projected box office drop from $130 million to about $115 million in the past 3 days or so, right after the story of James Gunn talking about kindness and immigration? Why did those numbers drop? the audience for Superman dropped by damn near a third compared to The Man of Steel, which was released right before Hollywood started going batshit crazy with woke progressive shit in their movies. So, what do you think happened to the roughly 30% who didn't show up this time? Are they simply waiting to see it next weekend? But I'm gonna leave it there. What do you make of the drop in audience from Man of Steel to this new iteration of Superman? How would you explain it? Drop your thoughts into the comment section below, and we will talk there. Thanks for watching, me hearties. If you haven't already, your Admiral is inviting you to subscribe to the channel and become a part of the crew. Life as a space pirate may not be glamorous, but there's always plenty of booty.